Welcome to the Hillbilly Chicken Ranch. I am Susan, your hostess, and we are joining a collaboration. This is my second video for this collaboration. It's called Plan to Can. It's hosted by the Miller Life Kitchen and Jeni Gal. These are great ladies. They're going to have a giveaway live on March 3rd, and the first prize will be a pressure canner. Yes, I said a pressure canner. So if you've never canned before, or you're an experienced canner, you may like this recipe that I'm about to do. This is a Copycat Van Camp's pork and bean recipe. I found it online. I will link that to this video in the description box, the actual recipe. I'm not following it exactly, and I'll tell you why. It calls for tomato juice, and my tomato juice looks fine, but it's a little on the weak side, and of course I've got seed in the bottom. I could actually strain these off, but we don't care. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my home canned tomato sauce with some canned low sodium tomato sauce from the store. Why do I want to can my own pork and beans? Well, have you seen the prices in the store? They're exorbitant. It's cheaper to buy a bag of beans. Honestly, it's cheaper to buy a bag of beans and make them yourself. Plus, I know exactly what is in my canning jars. Most pork and bean recipes calls for honey and mustard. This recipe calls for allspice, ground cloves, your tomato sauce, onion. It calls for sugar, but I'm going to use some local honey because I've got a little bit left in my jar. I want to use it up. And you can either use dry navy beans or you can use Great Northern beans. It's your preference. And a little bit of salt. Canning salt always when you're canning stuff. Now we're going to get into the equipment. You always want to start with clean canning jars, and you want to check your rims and the bottom of the jar. And this one has an imperfection in it. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but there's a little bitty bubble right there. That's going to cause this jar to break and leak out your product. Most canning jars today are safe, but I've had a few issues with the new ball canning jars, the pints especially, cracking up around the rim. I had dry goods in a canning jar recently that I pulled out, and it had a hairline crack up here at the top of the jar. Most cracks will happen at the bottom of your jar. If it happens in your canner and you can actually put the pieces back together with nothing missing, your product is still safe. But if you get a jar that breaks and shatters, throw your product away. Gather your canning tools. Everything ready to go. Now I'm doing a dry canning method today with dry beans. All I'm going to do is sort them, rinse them, and get them into my jars. And then I'm going to heat up my liquids to a boiling point. Let it boil for 3 minutes, turn the heat off, let it sit for 10 minutes, then fill my jars. Once my jars are filled, the rims cleaned, the lids and the bands applied, they will go into my canner. I will then set my canner to my sweet spot on my stove, which is about a 7. This is an electric stove. I do have a special burner for canning purposes on this stove. And it will vent for 10 minutes. Now, there is an issue when you look at recipes online, and I always double check recipes against what I know are the standards. This recipe said 1 inch of headspace, which is correct, but it said 65 minutes for pints. I disagree with that because we're going to be adding salt pork to this. I forgot to bring that out, but we're going to add some pork to this. And it said 75 minutes for quarts. The standard is 75 minutes for pints and 90 minutes for quarts, and that is for beans. And because it contains meat, you want to follow what the guideline is for meat. I think this recipe came from familycookbookproject.com. I'll double check that and put the link in the description box below. Let's get canning. The recipe also said that it would make 6 pints, and I know that was incorrect because it's using 2 pounds of beans, and that's 8 pints. But I've added an extra half cup of beans in here so that I can have a full canner going in. So this will be for 9 pints, this recipe. Okay, we're ready to get started. Now I've cleaned out my pot, and I'm not going to add any more salt because I've got salt in my tomato juice. And I'm using a quart and a half of tomato juice because I don't mind having a little extra. I can always make soup with it or use it in another dish. And I'm adding in that can is 15 ounces of tomato sauce. So let me get all this out of the way. Now the recipe calls for a cup of chopped onion. Normally you use a yellow or white onion when you're canning, but I had a red onion that I needed to use up, and I've actually added in about 1/8 of a cup more to that because I'm trying to fill up 9 pints instead of the 8 pints it would have filled up. I need a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. Get that lid off. And most of my spices come from the Amish or the Mennonite store. So a little bit more than a 1/4 teaspoon because I'm going to add an extra jar, just a hair over. And I'm going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves as well. And just a little bit over to make up the difference for that extra jar. I need, let me get my recipe over here. I need 3 tablespoons of sugar, and I have opted to use some raw local honey that's in the bottom of the jar, so we want to get this used up. And I'm just going to scrape down the rest of that because I've got a little bit over on my foods. So I'm going to go an extra teaspoon just to make sure I've got enough of that sweetener in there. Always make sure your kitchen started clean. I also have a clean dish rag to clean my hands. I've already soaked my beans and rinsed, sorted my beans, rinsed them. I'm going to get them into the jars. We're going to get this boiling, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this on and grab a lid and get that on there. All right, my broth is ready to go. I have cut up some bacon. You can look for bacon that has no preservatives in it. That would be a more natural bacon. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop 2 of these into each jar. And then I'm going to, if there's any left over, I'll just go back in and fill in a little bit more. You could make these vegetarian and leave the meat out. You're still going to cook them for 75 minutes. In my mind, I was saying 2 quarts. I needed 2 quarts of the tomato juice. and I didn't pull out 2 quarts. So we're just going to go ahead and try to get this evenly distributed across my jars. And I'm going to quickly heat up some more water. We'll be right back. So I want to get this to the 1-inch headspace. And I've adjusted my recipe, my written recipe, to include the extra jar. I'm adding in there that I'm using, I would use 2 quarts of tomato juice, 1 15-ounce jar of tomato sauce. Make sure that you are debubbling and that you check your headspace before you put them in the canner. And I'm dropping these on different, you want to make sure that your gasket and everything is centered on your jar. 1 finger on there. Drop your van, finger tight. Last jar. So our canner is loaded. I'm going to grab our canning lid. I've already checked the peephole. Check it again just for safety. Line my arrows up. Apply the lid. I've already got my stove set at the sweet spot, which is 7 on my stove. Sometimes between 7 and 8. We have 9 pints of pork and beans. I'm going to pull this one out because I just think it looks so pretty in the jar. Look at there. Remember, it was just a little bit of beans in the bottom. That's what I mean about expanding. These are still boiling hot, and they will sit on my counter for 12 to 24 hours. Tomorrow morning I'll get up, I'll take the bands off, check for seals, and then I will wash my jars, get them labeled, and into my pantry. So this is 9 meals, and it was made within a couple of hours, basically. It didn't take long to put together, and then it's the canning time of 75 minutes for pints and 90 minutes for quarts. And of course you adjust your weight on your pressure canner to your altitude. So Van Camp pork and beans, we have a copy of that on our pantry shelf now. And so economical, so frugal, and so delicious. Thank you, friends, for watching and being a part of Plan to Can. Y'all make sure you're checking out the playlist below because channels are dropping every day through the month of February with new recipes for you to try in your home kitchen. Be blessed, everybody.